A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our audience who are joining today from different parts of the world for another session in the Sciative Knowledge series. I'm Dr. Anshu Jalora and I'll be your host today. Before we start this session, I'd like to make a special mention. Kim Longhurst from Long Island has written to us. Enjoyed Sciative Knowledge session, much appreciated. Well, thank you, Kim. We at Sciative Solutions are committed to bringing amazing speakers in the Sciative Knowledge series. And along these lines, our speaker today is Patrick Taylor. Patrick is a business and process improvement expert, driving bottom line results through focusing on pricing related processes, determining price lift opportunities, and implementing pricing strategies is his specialty. With more than 25 years of experience in both international and domestic engagements, Patrick has been a global pricing leader at GE Oil and Gas for the past 4 years. During the 2 years before he joined the General Electric family, Patrick was the managing director of Strategy Process and Analysis LLC, an independent consulting firm. He enjoyed working with a variety of clients from multi-billion-dollar stock exchange listed waste management operators to privately held millions of dollars wholesale air conditioning, heat, and ventilator suppliers. Patrick is a certified professional pricer. He is pragmatic marketing certified. He has a Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. He was a Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award examiner. He was a speaker at the 21st Annual Pricex in 2008, and several of his articles have been published by the Professional Pricing Society and Vignaf Journal. Patrick, it's indeed an honor for us to have you as a speaker today.
Hi, good morning, afternoon, everyone. Evening, perhaps. Thank you. So,
just a comment for the audience. Audience can follow and post your comments on Twitter using hashtag Sciative and hashtag Ask Patrick. Towards the end, as time permits, we will take questions and comments posted by the audience. Remember to put hashtag Sciative and hashtag Ask Patrick at your tweets. Now today, Patrick will be sharing his views on getting started with pricing best practices. I think the toughest part of starting any great journey is to get started. It's important for pricing professionals to make a right start in the pricing practices. Thank you, Patrick, for speaking on this very interesting and important topic today. We look forward to hearing your views. Over to you.
Excellent. Can everyone hear me fine now?
Absolutely fine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I just want to start off with a bit of a generic introduction for one moment, and that is to share with you that in the past 25 years, the primary focus of my work has been mostly in the business-to-business environment, but I have bumped up against the consumer side of the marketplace as well. And what you're going to find is that because of that focus that I've had in my career, the focus of this presentation is about just getting started. Who are a little deeper in pricing experience, I apologize if this is a bit mundane, but what I find is that oftentimes there's a lot of great theory out there and books and information you can pull upon to better understand the theory behind it and the deep stuff of analytics. What oftentimes gets missed is just simply getting started and transitioning your business into and moving towards the world-class level. So what I want us to focus in on today is a couple of just key points. What really matters to you when you set a price? Why is cost plus as what I call evil or damaging to your business and very dangerous? I'm very concerned about the use of percentages in our business, and I'll discuss that as well. I make some distinctions between value-based and market-based pricing and how do I use them and when do I apply them. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. And then, I'm going to pull those things all together and I'm going to talk a little bit about creating pricing for new products or new services. I use those generically because it's the same set of questions. I have priced in both products and services. And I assure you that while the details are different, the questions remain. So same thing with understanding market-based pricing, even when there's not very much transparency from our competitors about what that price that they're putting on the table is, I'll talk to you a bit about that as well and how I approach that. And then at the end, I'm going to try to make some time for our questions and answers. Um, so just jumping right into it, what really matters when setting price? And the scenario I like to use is I like to use something that's more kind of down to earth that we all can relate to. Um, think about the last time that you bought something that was kind of expensive. Maybe it was a car, maybe it was a really nice watch or a beautiful suit of clothing. When you put yourself in the buyer's perspective, that helps you with your pricing. And as you can see in my artwork here, I've got a couple buying a car. When you buy a car or something of that price tag, what goes through your mind? You know, typically I'm thinking about my family and my needs for transportation. I'm thinking about, is it economical? Is it going to look sporty? Is it going to have enough seat belts for everyone? Does it have the horsepower I require? Every person has a different value proposition. And that value proposition are the needs that I have to have met by this vehicle. Same goes with my budget. Can I afford this solution? And most people will sit down with their spouse or their partner, or they'll sit down and think about their own budget and they'll say, how much can I afford? And maybe it's a monthly payment, maybe it's a total value. But say if they're, in argument's sake, they come out with a budget of 20,000 US dollars. Well, if that's 20,000 US dollars for a car and the vehicle is available for 30 or 50, it's out of my budget. I can't afford it. So simply put, those requirements have to be met within that range. If I want to put a price on the table to someone buying this car for higher than 20, I'm not selling to that customer because they just simply can't buy it. Additionally, once the customer has or the potential customer has found that the car is palatable within their range of budget and it meets their needs, they might see one on the lot and say, gee, how much is that one? The next thing they're really doing is trying to figure out how to get the best price they can for it. And what's their reference point? They're going to say, well, you know, there's a car lot across town and maybe I can get a better price there. Maybe I've seen some ads on the internet. They'll hopefully have done some research. And so basically that means that no matter even if I said it's 20 and 20 is their budget, if they can buy it 19 somewhere else and they see it as the same value as my offer, then I can't win that deal. I can't close it because they're going to go to the other place and buy it. If it's within a few dollars, maybe they won't care. But if it's outside of a range of reasonableness, and what the range of reasonableness is will vary by customer. Some people are more price sensitive than others. So I put this on the table because even though it's a retail example and I tend to focus on business to business, if I put myself in the customer's perspective, I see that there's really only two things that matter as a customer. What is it? What does it fit into my budget? And what is the next best competitive alternative to you? If I think about that as a pricing person, at no point does my customer care about my cost or my margins or anything else. These are the only two factors that we must focus on. Okay? So the maximum price I can charge is no more than the competitor's net of any customer observed benefits or disadvantages from my solution. And it's net of any price differentials between my offer and the competitors. So let's say we both had a car and they were both priced at 19,000, but theirs had air conditioning and mine does not. Well, the customer will probably perceive that the air conditioning is worth something and might more likely to take that offer. Okay. Even if it's $5 more, they would take it, right? Maybe it's $20, maybe it's $100 more, but they might be able to do it as long as it's within their budget. So at what point did the customer say, gee whiz, I'm worried about your cost or your margins? They don't. It's simple. Cost plus pricing is a problem, and we need to absolutely be aware that the percentages even make it worse. And I'm going to dig into this a little bit. Cost plus pricing is basically any method where you take your cost and you add a margin to it and you try to come up with a service or product price. Okay. I've seen companies go out of business. I've been involved in companies that went out of business because they just simply would not listen to reason about what the customer will pay and how the market performs. So if you're doing cost plus today, I highly encourage you to rethink what you're doing, why you're doing it, and think more about what your customers will pay and try to understand the competition. This is the number one reason, this crazy chart, I'll explain to you here in a moment what we're looking at. is the number one reason why you absolutely got to not do cost plus. Cost plus is dangerous. What this is it's a graphical representation. It's mathematically true. It's not necessarily a reflection of any specific business. What you're seeing on the left-hand side, the vertical is a price point. And I picked US dollars, forgive me for being North American centric, but it could be any currency. It could be pounds, it could be rupees, it could be you name it. And then on the horizontal axis, you're seeing 10 periods of time. Again, I don't care if they're days, months, years, weeks, whatever works for you. Over 10 periods of time, you drive costs down over all these periods of time by 2% per period. You start off with a price point. Let's say you're doing cost plus at $65 a cost. You put 35% margin on it, and that's what this percentage column is on the right. We're holding the margin constant. At 35% on $65, you would have charged a $100 price point. If over 10 periods of time you drove your cost from $65 down by that 2%, you would now be at $54.19 a cost, compounded. What that means is if I consistently say I want 35% margin, I've now lowered my price from $100 to $83.37. So why did I lower my price? Did the market demand it? Did my customers insist on better pricing? No, I was working harder. I was working smarter. I beat up my vendors and demanded a better price from them. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. But what happened is I didn't pocket any of that margin. In fact, not only did I not pocket that margin, but I also gave away additional incremental margin because I lowered my price. So my old margin was $35, 100 minus the 65. My new margin now is $83 minus the $54.29. So I wind up with $5.82 worse. Why? Because I worked harder, worked smarter, and drove costs out of my operation. So was that a good decision to work harder and smarter and lower my price? Absolutely not. Assuming the $100 was working in the marketplace. If I could sell it for 100, why would I sell it for 83? Oh, but I maintained my margin percentage. Again, 35% of $54 is smaller than 35% of $65. And that's a real problem. So you got a percentage focus issue, and you've also got an issue of arbitrarily set your price. So this is why it's important that you separate between price discussions and cost and margin. Okay. Moving on. So again, back to the percentages, I continually go back to asking people kind of to think about from a common sense perspective. Would you rather have 20% of $100,000 or 5% of $1 million? Most of us, when we're thinking about it and put on an analytical hat, would certainly prefer the 5% net, because I don't take 5% to the bank. I take $50,000 to the bank, and $50,000 is more than $20,000. Happen in many companies is they get very focused on, I've got to have a 35% margin on all my deals. So that means that on the big deals, they wind up being priced too high and they lose a lot of big opportunities. And on the small deals, they get lots of them at 35%. But then what happens is they've missed pricing as high as they could have priced. They might have only gotten 50% on some of those deals. So I see this happen a lot in big companies. And by the way, the numbers I'm using are just randomly picked. They're not factual to GE or any other companies that I've worked for. But what I see is this tendency by management to say, no, we've got to have these percentages. And it's very dangerous for your business. It creates a problem. Just to go back for half a second, what happens is if my $100 price point was effective, we've given it up as I mentioned before, but the reverse also happens. If my cost had been $54 and I was working with it from using some kind of an overhead spread, like my fixed overhead, my total cost of the business is being applied, and this is based on the number of units I'm selling. What happens is I may not have been competitive at $83, so the next period of time, I have to raise my price because I got to now have a higher cost per unit, and now I'm raising the price. So if I wasn't competitive at $83, how competitive would I be at $100? Even less. And so it becomes a death spiral. It'll put the company out of business. And I've actually worked with companies that have done this behavior. So it's not saying people might say, well, that doesn't seem very logical. But the reality is that we don't think about it that way. We get so caught up in our day-to-day of what we're doing that we fail to think through the implications. So Managing the opportunities on a fixed percentage margin must be obtained right. Managing all of your opportunities is what you have to do. If you're going to look at your opportunities and you're worried about your margins, absolutely steer clear of percentages. But again, this is not a venue for seeking out price. It's about a business decision whether you're willing to accept a deal. Okay, so I just want to quickly summarize and keep myself on time here. Why is cost plus pricing such a problem? The answer is simple. We leave money on the table because we either cost plus and too low relative to what the customers value. We might put it too high of a price and we lose opportunities that we really should be winning. We spend a lot of time driving out costs and we wind up with less margin dollars at the end of the day. I've seen a lot of companies internally, people are debating over which cost to use to evaluate a deal or an opportunity. And it's like looking at I describe it as looking at your stomach and trying to figure out what the weather is going to be today. We're very inwardly focused when we're thinking about our cost and we're not thinking about the price. Additionally, and like the final point here is that evaluating smaller total margin opportunities as being better for our business than the bigger ones with lower percentages. When in truth, you might get more operational efficiencies by running a bigger opportunity through your company. So making a reasonable profit is okay. Worrying about your margins is okay, but it's an internal business concern and decision. It has absolutely nothing to do with pricing. So again, kind of going back to this little view of looking at the cars, if you ask me what is value-based pricing then, and what is market-based pricing, and how do I use them, my answer is value-based pricing occurs when we understand what the customer needs relative to their budget. To me, when I hear value-based pricing, I'm thinking about me making a decision for my family to purchase something, or me making a decision about buying something for my business. Those are things where I evaluate my needs. I put maybe a list of priorities and criteria around what I'm willing to accept. And then based on that, I then look at my budget and say, what can I afford? How is that going to, is there a business case in that if I'm doing business to business? Does it increase my revenue or cut my costs? Okay, that's value-based pricing. If I look at it from a market-based pricing, which is what grounds me in reality, is I'm now looking at it from what are my competitors' price points, and can I beat them with my offer versus their offer? Okay. The price where we can sell our solution then is found in what the customer values, excuse me, and the price that they can pay for something that's just like it out in the marketplace. Okay. So this is all that matters as a pricing person. All the other stuff is noise and business decisions and are interesting to talk about. But at the end of the day, when I'm doing pricing, I only think about these two key factors. Okay. So how do I get to them? How do I get to a market-based price, and what really is market-based price? I've spent a bit of time already talking about value-based pricing and talk about the budget, the car, and that scenario, so I don't want to belabor that. We'll talk a little more about that as we talk about new price point setting. Right now, though, I want to focus on market-based pricing because this is one of the areas I find is the most difficult in my day-to-day job. What I think about is, and those of you who are not familiar with the geography, this is North America and the United States on this map. This little dip right here is where I'm at. I'm in Houston, Texas. And this is a hurricane that was heading into the Caribbean area. Those out in the Pacific might call them typhoons. And if you're lucky enough to live in a region of the world that doesn't have hurricanes, then you probably have at least seen Weather Channel or some kind of a TV news report on the weather. And this is essentially the same scenario. As the weather reporter is taking history, and they're looking at the last 100 years of history about when a storm of this nature came into the same area of the world, zones of the weather. They're looking at the temperature of the water. They're looking at the air temperature, and they're looking at the wind shear. And so if I look at this little eye of the storm, the purple is probably the actual water, and the red being water vapor, maybe off the wind shear. And the rest of this is all a forecast. It's a time-oriented, like 5-day forecast as to where they believe that storm is going to go. It's a band somewhere between Cuba and Mexico and Belize. They think the rain is coming. They don't know where, they don't know exactly, but it's a big darn storm, and it's what I would call, we call it the ballpark, right? You want to be in the range of where it's going to happen, and the people here really care about it. Tip of Cuba is closest to the yellow in 5 days, as is this isthmus here, the horn here of Mexico. So I would be willing to venture a bet that these guys in here are going to probably get the worst of the weather. A storm like this has lots of wind, it has lots of rain, it has a big storm surge. So is the forecast going to be accurate? Okay. What have they done? They've looked at the historical data. They looked at the exact location as not being exactly as critical as much as these people all need to hunker down and be ready for the storm to come through. And then as more data comes in, as time proceeds, they're going to continue to revise that model. This is the same technique I'm using for pricing, by the way. What I'm doing is I'm tracking over time the high, low, and median price points, and that's that range of price, which is also the range of the storm. And by the way, if you notice, it was accurate for 5 days. Initially, I was worried about it coming up into North America and hitting me in Houston. It is not true anymore. But boy, for those first 5 days, it was very accurate. So the message is you have to keep updating your data, and you have to keep looking at the marketplace and saying, what was the next best price point? And here's the thing. If I've sold something to a customer at a price point, value criteria for their budget, and it also beat a competitor's price point. The problem is, for example, in my business, I cannot legally go through my competitor's trash cans to find old price sheets. I cannot take a price sheet that a competitor gave to a customer if it's stamped as confidential and look at that information. It is illegal in the United States, and we consider it to be unethical in my culture. If I can't get a competitive price point that way, how do I know their price? The pricing is not available to me on the internet because I'm selling in business to business. Right now, I'm selling very large subsea equipment. Okay. So it's all put out to bid and out to tender. And unless it's a country like I think in India or Mexico where it's a public tender and everyone knows everyone's price on that bid, most places don't do that. So I don't know what price point, for example, my customers paid to a competitor for a piece of equipment in North America or Europe. So the next best thing I have is when I win, if I track that data by product, by segment, by region, by time, I'm looking at all the key factors I have about that, much like with the weather. Then if I'm tracking those over time, then I'm getting a trend of price, and I'm able to start forecasting based on other indexes. For in my example, in my business, the price of oil is a good index. The price of steel can be an index for me, right? If my steel's going up and my pricing model is predicting a downward slope, I might make my next offer at a flat line, okay, depending on those indexes. So without getting into the heavy mathematics, what I'm able to do then is to understand the market price, because over time, I see the pattern. It's not 100% accurate, but it gets you darn close to the right price to win. So if I put it all together, I've got the value proposition on one side, alternative on the other, and then I got my own internal business decision about whether I want to sell it. If I can't make a reasonable profit, I'm obviously not going to want to sell it. I want to move on, or I have to decide to find another way to get cost out of my offering. So in that range is the sweet spot, as we call it, of price. So only market and value based what it is for my customer is really relevant for setting price. I just keep harping on that because that's the one thing I want you to take away from here today. Anything else, if it's not related to the customer's value, if it's not related to the market value of competitiveness, competitor solution, then don't think about it when setting the price. Come back later and have a business discussion about whether it makes sense for your company to make this sale. So this is a really busy slide. I don't want to read it to everyone. I've provided a soft copy, a PDF of this document so that you can get a copy if you'd like to. You probably need to reach out to Dr. Chalora. Maybe you'll talk about that in a moment. But what do we ask? What are the key questions that I ask when I'm coming up with a new product or a new solution for the marketplace? Okay. First of all, who's my customer? Who am I selling this to? Why are they going to buy it from me, right? What's their benefit? What pain point or problem am I solving for them? Once I understand that, I also need to think about, do all my customers fit that into that category? Maybe there's some that have a little different perspective on that, and I can segment them out. If that's the case, how do I want to create? Do I want to create some channels and sell it retail? Do I want to sell it wholesale? Do I want to do it by geographies? I need to think about how my customers buy. Customers in Asia might be more price sensitive or want to negotiate more, whereas the Europeans might want a fixed price. And so I need to take those things into account. So at the end of the day, my net price makes sense for the marketplaces that I'm selling into, right? When I think about my product, how am I offering the solution to the marketplace? We always hear a lot of your marketing guys talk about razors and razor blades. As a kind of a common story, but there's really a lot of information in this, because if I understand the product strategy of going to market, I understand the value proposition of going to market, coming up with a price point becomes much more easy. Okay. Additionally, I always challenge people to think about, am I giving too much? Particularly in North America, we're really bad about we want to give everybody what we call the Swiss Army knife. It has every little gadget and every little tool on it. And the reality is, the person might just simply need a little knife. They don't need all the other attachments, and they're looking for a lowest cost solution. If you force them to buy the Swiss Army knife, the price point they're willing to pay is only going to be the same as a simple knife. They're not going to pay anything more for all that extra stuff. So since that's not a value, can we strip that away and make an alternative offer? Or am I going to drive up my costs and sell only one product to the marketplace? That's a business decision, but that business decision drives our pricing. Market-based pricing, on the other side, looking at the competitiveness in of other people's offers, is important. And so once I've figured out kind of the value proposition and what I think it should be worth to my customers, I now have to go back and say, who's my competitor? And I oftentimes hear people say, oh, I've come up with this really great new solution. No one's ever done it. It's a brand new product. It's absolutely unique. There is no alternative. The reality is, there's always an alternative. And that alternative might be that the person does without, or they buy 3 or 4 other small weird products, kludge them together, and get something that meets the need. Now, it may not be very elegant, but it might work. And so the answer is, there's always a competitor. There's always another price point that we need to consider, right? So think about our customers, ask questions about what benefit are they going to get? How is my product different and benefits from the other groups of customers, solutions that they're looking at, or other competitor solutions they're looking at, and how, what different groups have I got, right? So you might have a customer who's totally unwilling to do it, and they're doing without today, but they know the extreme value of your product, and they're willing to pay more. You might also have customers out there who are looking at it going, I can get these other things, and I have a competitive price point. Most times the latter is going to be the case, okay? The key here is empathize with your customer and think about it from a total cost of ownership of your product. I had somebody who come to me one time, and they were looking at a product software solution, and it was a really nice software solution. And I don't want to go into the details because it was proprietary. But what happened was, in order to make their software work, you had to buy a certain platform, a certain server, and you had to buy the software to run the server, the SQL Server software behind it, and pay licensing for it. And then they had to have somebody who was a database administrator running the system. And next thing you know, what appeared to be a very simple price of a very simple software solution now became, from a customer's perspective, this behemoth of cost structure to buy the solution. So when they were thinking about their price relative to the competitor's price, they weren't thinking about the total solution relative to the competitive offer. So you have to kind of think about this from what we call an apples to apples perspective. The next thing I tell people is, if you come up with a pricing structure and you've done your mapping, like I've shown you kind of with the hurricane or whatever, and I like to have different tiers of pricing. I like to set what we call like a list price or a target price, and then I have a market price, which is kind of like what most people will probably be willing to pay, and then the lowest price I'm willing to settle for, which should be reserved for my best customers, meaning the highest volume, most revenue, best relationship, whatever that might be for you. The price requires discipline. So you set the pricing by the segment, by the customer group, by the channel. And once you have that set, my comment is, keep looking at it, keep understanding what that range is, and over time, keep tracking it. And as new deals come through and more data comes in, reset it, readdress it, understand where it is. If you like to do a list price and then take discount off of it, that's the same effect as doing the market and floor price. Everybody likes to manage their pricing in different ways. I'm ambivalent. It doesn't make a difference to me. It's what works best for you and your business. Is be disciplined. Keep track of it, run it, have some focus around it. Once, whatever time period that is, once a month, once a quarter, once a week, come back, look at the most recent transactions and say, do I have enough data to tell me if there's a new trend? Okay. And then come reset your pricing and continue to look at it. That way you're moving with the storm, as I showed in the diagram before, and it moves into Mexico. It doesn't move into North America, but I've stayed within the right range all along. If you do this, it will help you maximize your revenue, and it will also help you to make sure that you're driving as many sales as possible at the most profitable rates. So what other key questions might I want to ask when there really is no transparency, right? Have I looked at all the alternatives, which I mentioned before? Can I legally find out what the alternative price is worth? Like I said, if you can't, you're going to have to look at the market data and keep tracking it, right? Is it safe to assume that my solution would beat the competitor's price? My answer is yes. If you sold something, your customer saw the value at your price point. It's a valid data point. Now, did you leave money on the table? That's why you need more data, right? If you create a history file and you can start seeing the pattern and the trend, you'll start seeing places where you might have charged a little higher price and got away with it. You'll also see this in places where you quoted too high and you lost the opportunity. Those are valid data points. The key is, if you are going to track lost price points, make sure you get a sense for how much you lost by. If you can't get a good handle on that, then my comment is, look at it, think about it. It's an interesting data point, but don't put as much stock into it. Focus on where you're winning and make that your first priority. Secondarily, if you have anecdotal data where the customer told you, oh, you lost by 15%, that's relevant data. The only thing I'll tell you on that is understand that sometimes our customers lie to us. Yes, it's terrible to say, but if you lost by 10%, they're typically going to tell you lost by 15. That way they can get you to come back next time with an even sharper price. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're comparing that to price points where you've won, and see if it still makes sense. Okay. If I offer an incentive, I try to make sure that it's not a permanent price point. I will take that out of my model. Customer who's helping me develop a new product solution, or they're highly strategic and I really want to get their business, so I'll offer them a one-time deal. That should not become a permanent price concession. It's just a one-time thing, and I need to understand where I'm at relative to the band of pricing I've been studying, and I need to be prepared to walk away if other customers want that price. Okay, so taking this kind of the next level, if you've kind of mastered a lot of this, I ask people to start thinking about why would one segment pay more than another. Think about which segments new prospects belong in. When you come into you have the same customers you've been selling into, and then you start to look at some more new customers you're going to go target. Think about that, right? How much more does one group benefit from your solution than others? That's also a valid thing. It just depends. So, for example, in oil and gas, at one point in my career, I was pricing out solutions for what we call pigging, where you run a tool down a pipeline and it's scanning for errors and flaws and problems in that business. What happened was we found that natural gas customers, because of the danger associated with the blowing up pipeline, were willing to pay more than those who paid for oil leaks, because an oil leak didn't cause as much of a publicity problem. Okay, so think about those, what I call pricing triggers, and understand those before you quote. Again, I've already mentioned being methodical, and I know we're running short on time for questions and answers. So I'm going to wrap this up real quickly, and that is to say, pricing is purely a function of what the customer will pay relative to their budget and the next best alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for such insightful session. In such a small session, you have covered all the pertinent pricing related points, and I'm sure audience must have taken notes on what are the best practices they need to follow. If I have to summarize some of the key points that I've noted down from your session, you clearly emphasized on understanding what customer is looking to buy. So what kind of features customers is looking to have in a car, and can you fit those features in the within the budget that he has. So clearly a focus on what customer needs are and what his paying capacity is, and then combine that with what kind of market realities you're faced with, what is it that your competition is offering, how much better value you're offering in comparison to your competition, and how much is your total cost of ownership. I recall you've used this term also. And in addition to that, I would say that you can probably look at both the total value of ownership as well as the total cost of ownership. Because over a period of time, it's possible that your product will actually deliver more value to the customers, as in addition to maybe having a lower total cost of ownership. So probably having this double focus on not only having a focus on total cost of ownership, but total value of product ownership is something that organizations can focus on. One very important point you mentioned was you have to empathize with your customers, and you have to be very disciplined in your approach, and you can't take all the data points that become available to you blindly. Sometimes the data points might not be correct, and that's very likely to happen. So again, great sets of points. uh, just a few questions I would like to ask you. So, let's say, for example, a company has been in the process of taking a cost based approach, or maybe follow a competition type of approach in their pricing, and they realize that yes, they need to change. So, over the short term, what should they do so that they can go on to this pricing best practices, and what kind of capabilities they should build so that they have a solid set of pricing best practices established for the long run. So what should be the focus for the short run, and what should be the focus for the long run, and what kind of capabilities organizations need to build so that they can follow pricing best practices?
That's a great question. There's a lot in that question, actually, so I'll try to take it piece by piece. And if I miss anything, please remind me, okay? The first thing you said was, look, historically, you might have a company who's done their pricing on cost plus. The first capability you need is you need a good analyst, or someone who understands kind of what we're talking about. You might, if you don't have a huge budget to staff somebody permanently, you might try to find a third-party consultant who's willing to give you some hours for you. But what you want to do then is you also can't, what we call, boil the ocean. You can't do everything, right? So again, just depending on your resources and what you can do, what I tell people to do is this: get an analyst, get them focused on your what we call an 80-20 type rule. Focus in on the biggest product or most important product in your portfolio, and just pull data, pull history. If they've been doing cost plus and you've been quoting somebody, whether they're on pieces of paper in a file box, they're on old spreadsheets somewhere, they might be on an old, like a, God forbid, AS400 type database system, whatever that's in, whether you need to have somebody write a SQL query in IT and pull you the data, or your analyst has to do spreadsheet by spreadsheet and merge all of that data together. That's my first starting point. I have unfortunately worked with companies that did everything on paper. I had a customer that I consulted to that shipped me 12 what we call banker boxes, the really long boxes, look like file drawers, full of quotes, and said, go get them. And I got to tell you, it is not a pleasant experience. It did add time to my project, and I did a lot of manual just digging through boxes, looking for quotes and looking for certain key products and service offerings. It is unpleasant, but if you can do that and have that discipline and go back a reasonable amount of time, you can create a trend. Started on looking at how to do it. Additionally, if you look at how things were quoted in the past, you'll see how the customer wants it. Typically, they'll give you an RFP and say, oh, I want the base offer with these kind of options. They're going to tell you how they want quoted. Like this already in the marketplace, right? They're already used to buying it. So that's the first thing I would do. Longer term, and getting back into that answer, what I would focus is, once you've kind of got the pricing trends kind of going for that key product and portfolio, you've got to create a tool or a calculator of some sort that makes it easy to use, okay? So I've done my analysis, I've got all this great pricing data, But if I can't communicate that in an easy way for my people who are doing the bids, because oftentimes I may be doing the analysis work, but there might be a commercial team who's doing our quotes. I've got to give them something because I can't do it all, right? Otherwise, I become the spreadsheet jockey who's always doing every bid. And if they're already doing that work on a cost plus basis, if I can give them a calculator that allows them to evaluate using my pricing logic on every deal, using whatever the configuration is for that offering, and very quickly get to it, whether it be a spreadsheet or something you build into a big machines application, or you buy a fancy software package that does commercial offers. I don't care how you do it, but you've got to longer term find a way of embedding your pricing intelligence where the decision is made, and that's when the bid's happening. So if you're working with a bigger firm, you absolutely got to get involved with the commercial quotation team. If it's just you running your small company, then you need to have somebody if it's just you, then you need to have the discipline of creating a very simple calculator to look that up so that when you quote your price, you're consistently using your database. Answer the question, Dr. Jolera.
Well, that's a great response. So you mentioned that start with having an analyst sniff through the data, if I might say that. Start analyzing the data, maybe pull up data which is stored in spreadsheets in some old servers in maybe mainframe machines, and start making sense with the data, start connecting the data with the business, and then over a period of time establish automated tools so that this entire process can be done at scale, and you can really support the team which is working in the field, so the feet on streets can get the right pricing support from the main office. Well, that's a great suggestion. Thank you. Another question, we have a question posted on Twitter by George Wade, and he's writing, I'm selling shoes online. What pricing best practices apply to me?
Okay, so George, I will share with you. Like I said, my focus has typically been more of a business-to-business market. If you're selling your shoes online, I don't know if you're selling them to other companies or if you're selling them retail to consumers. In either case, here's the good news: data on shoes online. What I would do is I would take stock of who I feel my biggest competitors are for a like offering. Selling something really specialized, let's say it was a special work boot with metal toes and things like that, there are certain types of people who are going to buy those. And I would go out and search where they would go search, and just do a simple search on Google or whatever tool you use, and find out what those competitors are offering, and I would look at the pricing that they're offering. If you want to get really sophisticated, you can do like search spiders, and you can get some very neat online tools that allow you to, I think it's web crawler, excuse me, is the term. So it crawls all these websites. You tell it which websites they are, bases, and extracts what the competitor pricing is for those. And something like that, I would do it pretty frequently too, maybe once a day, or once a week, once a month, because I want to know if their pricing is changing. Hopefully that answers his question.
Absolutely. So your recommendation is that start getting access to market data, and in online space, it is far more easier to collect market data because you have lots of scraping tools, web scraping tools, crawlers. In fact, many companies provide these scraping sorts of services. So there is plenty of market information available in the online space, and sellers, and George has not mentioned whether he's a seller on Amazon, whether he's having his own website, or he's uh, selling shoes to some other company. But in each of these scenarios, it's very important for George to have access to competition prices, understand what customers are looking for, and make an informed decision. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for this amazing, insightful session today. I'm sure our audience will have taken notes and will go back to their work with some amazing learning.
Yep. Thank you very much. Like I said, Dr. Jiller, if you can, if they want to, if you can somehow send them a copy of the PDF document, so they didn't have to hopefully do a screenshot of every page I presented, please feel free to share that content. There's nothing proprietary in there. That's
Definitely. So, Patrick, what we will also do is we will provide a copy of today's session on YouTube, and it will also have a link on our website so that those people who want to watch the video later, they can have access to this video. And since you're providing your copy of your PPT today, so audience can write to me at info@sciative.com. I'll repeat, info@sciative.com, SCIATIVE.com, and I'll be very happy to share a copy of Patrick's presentation today. Well, thank you again. For the audience, this knowledge series is being conducted by Sciative Solutions. Sciative helps companies compete and grow profitably through its scientific price optimization solutions and services. Please keep checking sciative.com for future sessions in the Sciative Knowledge series. Our next session is on December 28th at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and our distinguished speaker in that session is Mr. Eric Robles from Philippines, and he will be talking about executing price discounts strategically. Well, thank you for joining today and look forward to seeing you in our future sessions. Thank you, Patrick, one more time. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.